Thank you for joining us today for a virtual fireside chat on building wellness in your life with Dr. Traj Nibber, PhD, founder, and CEO of Advanced Orthomolecular Research, AOR. Traj Nibber, PhD, is the founder and CEO of AOR with degrees in pharmacy, specialty in industrial pharmacy, toxicology, and a PhD in experimental surgery and hepatology. Traj is interested in innovative natural molecules as well as their delivery systems. Body systems and topics of interest to Traj include the liver, cardiovascular health, and anti-aging. Dr. Nibber founded AOR to clear the misdirection prevalent in the nutraceutical world and provide people with highly effective research-backed products. So before we get started, some quick housekeeping notes. Please make sure to ask your questions and add your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And we'll open up an audience Q&A at the very end of this chat. So let's get started. Thank you so much, Traj, for being here today. So how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure. So how have you been holding up during the pandemic?
Pandemic really has had no negative impact on me or my lifestyle. So I've continued as before.
Completely the exact same. Nothing's changed in your life.
No, nothing.
Wow. Well, you're lucky then. So how, let's go way back. How did AOR get started?
Well, that's a long story, but
We have time.
in 1987, I moved from the UK to Canada and as a pharmacist. And within a year, I opened my pharmacy in a town called Smiths Falls, about an hour's drive from Ottawa. And I quickly found out that this mall that I opened my pharmacy was a very quiet mall. And it was long hours, like 9 hours a day, and then 2 hours coming and going back from home. So it was a long time, and I couldn't compete with the established pharmacies and the bigger chains. So as always happens, fate intervened. And I got a prescription once, which is a very odd prescription for gold chloride drops. And that was something I never encountered. Anyways, the long shot of that was that I find out that because I couldn't compete, it was best for me to just go into vitamins. And I had very little idea of vitamins in those days. As a traditional pharmacist, you tend to stay away from vitamins. So, but I just to stay afloat, keep the business going, I took out all the cosmetics and toiletries and confectionery and diapers and all those and just put vitamins. And then words quickly spread across actually all the way to Manitoba. There was this odd pharmacy that had just vitamins and hard to find supplements. And in those days, unique supplements were like CoQ10. I mean, they're common now, but in those days, NAC, CoQ10. And at that time, around 1980, 88, 89, it was the height of AIDS epidemic. So I started getting lots of calls from PWA and AIDS group, especially from Toronto. And around that time, they were asking for a lot of supplements, a lot of underground stuff they couldn't get hold on, but also high dose vitamins which weren't available. And they would always say, can you put something together for me? And I started doing that. And at that time, I opened Canada's first buyers club for AIDS patients from a pharmacy. And that was a learning for me. In that I learned more about products, I learned more about supplements, I delved deeper into the research, why this group of patients were asking for high dose zinc, high dose selenium. And that was my first foray into the nutritional world. And it opened my eyes to the possibilities of what nature could do. And from that, I decided that at the same time, I started looking at the brands that were commonly available in those days. And I noticed that they had lots of fillers, a lot of excipients, which were unnecessary. And I was saying, well, why did they put this in? As well as why aren't there more supplements that people are asking for? And that was the first introduction into AOR of developing a supplement line that would be unique, free of these allergens and excipients. And that's how AOR really started.
Wow. Did you ever think you'd be an entrepreneur and starting your own business?
No, again, it was fate and necessity that I always wanted to be a professor at a university. And because of my move to Canada, no, I did not. So it was very fortunate, I guess.
Yes, of course. So, to that point, what kind of advice would you give young entrepreneurs today?
Um, I would say, forget about the idea of greatness. When you're young, you say, "Oh, I'm going to achieve great things. I want to do this." I think forget about that because it's really a favorite pastime of the ego. It just keeps you occupied rather than doing anything. Rather, I would say focus on and care about the steps you take, the actions you take on a daily basis, even if they are small steps. Cumulatively, they add up and they contribute a lot. And have your values. You cannot do everything. Find a niche, stick to that niche, and try to do that as best as possible. And never compromise on your principles because that is the integrity. 20, 30 years when you look back, you'll say, you know what? I stood by my principles. This is who I am. And I don't think it is about, the fame, the size of the company, the millions that you get in that sense, or the brand. It's about what you achieved at the end of the day. And that's important. You only realize, I'm realizing now at my late end of the career that those things were important and I'm glad I stuck by them.
Oh, those are some great tips. So we've talked to other entrepreneurs in the past, and we talk about, mentors. So what keeps you motivated? Do you have anyone that inspires you, or who's been a mentor for you along the journey?
Yeah, my mentors, I had many mentors. And I think another, perhaps a lesson for youngsters that I would say is learn from anyone and everyone. Um, be like a sponge, ready to learn. Put aside your ego. And I was fortunate to encounter lots of people in my journey, and I thank them all. Isaac Newton once said that the reason I've been able to see further into the heavens, into the science, is because I stood on the shoulders of giants, and I stood on those giants. And some of them are still working with AOR, some of them have moved on, and I thank them all. Those were my true um, motivators and inspirational people. Apart from that, my family, of course. I would say my brother. He's always believed in me right from the get-go. Even though he's a professor himself, he's always had firm belief in me. And my wife, I would say my wife has always stood by me and made decisions which I couldn't, and the wisdom which I didn't have. So I would say those two were the main ones.
It's always nice to have that support system.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your daily routine. Do you have a strict routine that you follow to keep your mind and body healthy?
I do. I do believe in a disciplined life. I think it's important. I've learned very early on in my career that it's easy to form good habits as it is to form bad habits. Just as easy. There's no difference. And I'm reminded of actually a First Nations a story where a grandfather is telling his grandson, he's saying, there's a battle raging within me, and it's between these two wolves, and uh, and that fight is also occurring in every human being, including you, grandson. And the grandson looks up and he says, well, which wolf will win? And the grandfather looks down and he says, the one that you feed. So it's important that we feed, you know, have a discipline. And it's important to keep a balance. It can't be work, work, work. I mean, later on you realize, well, I was able to balance my life, I was able to devote to my family and friends, as well as I was able to devote to my work, as I was able to devote to my own self, which is important, my health, as well as my spiritual or mental needs. And I do follow that because I think the mind has this, well, constant tendency to waver, to go off on tangents, to daydream, to create these things and create narratives which don't even exist. And it's a constant fight. And unless you keep that on a leash and practice that behavior, the Stoics or the Zens or whatever we call it, um, you will get into problem very quickly because you can easily get inundated and overwhelmed. So I think a disciplined life is important. I'm no athlete. I'm no, I wouldn't say a, example of stories, but I'm inspired them and I try to do the very best. That is important.
Right. And, especially today, we're always online, always in front of our laptops. What do you do to really focus and make sure that you step away from work? Do you have a daily kind of set time where you say, okay, I'm taking a break or I'm taking time for myself?
Yes, I mean, part of my job, fortunately and unfortunately, fortunate because my major contribution is that I go and sit in front of a computer and have to read papers, scientific papers. That's my job as a director of research for AOR. But I get up and I walk for walks or go around and talk to people, see how they're doing, get inspired by them, see, and I do that. And as to, the cell phones and that, I engage very, very little. I do not, in fact. Only I use that. I'm old fashioned. I only engage in them when, there's an issue, but otherwise I never look at that. I have a strict regimen of going to bed early, getting my sleep, um, keeping away from, because I mean, at work is enough. 3-4 hours is more than enough for a daily for me. And that's about it. I don't engage anymore.
Wow, you're lucky. We
Well,
should,
I think it's old fashioned, right? I think youngsters, my children also tend to be more involved in social media. I am less inclined. So that's a
right.
blessing.
Well, it definitely works for you, right? So keep doing what you're doing. So to that point, what is your advice for adding healthy habits to your daily routine for people who are looking for a lifestyle change?
Yeah, I think well, the first thing is, I mean, to start a new habit, I think you got to start it. Don't say, well, I'm going to do it resolutions, or I'm going to do it tomorrow, I'm going to do the end of next week. No, you got to be done right now. The soon as you say, well, I'll start it such and such, you already lost the battle. So start right now. And the other ingredient is always do it daily. There cannot be any cheat days. I think these cheat days, well, they can't. I think if to form a successful, easy habit is don't cheat, just do it every day. Yeah, so for example, if you are going for a jog or push-ups or whatever, take it easy, but do it every day. So I think those would be mine, is start now and do it every day, whatever you happen to doing it, whether it's yoga, whether it's breathing exercises, or whether it's yeah, do it every day.
That's great advice. So what are the myths most common when it comes to supplements?
Hmm. Well, I guess I've been through the round, as it were, for 30 odd years. I think the misconception is that supplements can do anything and everything. They can treat cancer, they can, serious infections, they can combat COVID, and that's not the case. That they can't, and it's dangerous to think that. The flip side of the coin is some people say, well, supplements don't do anything. Waste of time, waste of money. The old comment that is expensive urine when it came to vitamin C. That's not true either. I think the truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. I would say to any consumer or anyone is to do your research. Now we have lots of access to research. Do your proper research, and I think you'll find what supplements can and cannot do.
That's great. So is there a must-have from AOR supplements that you can't live without or would suggest for us to try first?
For me, no, there isn't any supplement that I cannot live without. I think it's so no, but I would say, and it's not necessarily AOR's product. I would say the must is increased fiber in your diet. I think that if anything it is to anyone, I think we miss on fiber. And fiber, even though it's tend to be thought of old fashioned, it isn't. I think fiber is one ingredient. Whatever fiber you take is a key thing to a good, healthy life, not just from your gut, but because the gut microbiota influences so many other organs. Cognition is one thing, but kidneys, heart, everything. I think just increase fiber in whatever form, but take that. And that's not AOR product, by the way. It could be any product. So
So can you tell us a little bit more about the products that you do offer? What's the range? What could we expect when looking for your products?
yeah, I think right at the beginning, early in my career, you asked what was motivated me. Motivation was, as a pharmacist and coming from the scientific background, I was intrigued to see well, why is it that natural products take so long to work? You know, when you recommend to a friend, you say, well, take this, but it's going to work in 2 months or whatever. Why do they? My question was, why do natural products need to take that long? Why can't they be as effective as a prescription drug without the side effects? So that was the motivation, that was the goal, and it still continues to be the goal. And in that pursuant of that goal, looked at the only way you can achieve that goal is by doing research. So AOR, throughout the 30 years it's been in existence, we've collaborated very extensively with the universities across North America, but also Europe as well. And we've had 60 collaborations with universities and researchers over that course of time. And as a consequence, because of that engagement with academia, with the research, we've been able to come up with lots of novel products, first in the world, in fact, lipoic acid, strontium for bone health, which was very novel. People thought strontium, isn't that radioactive? No, look at the research and it tells you otherwise. Nitrates, which are excellent from leafy green vegetables, you get nitrates, and they're excellent in your cardiovascular health. Curcumin was another eye-opener in terms of how do you make curcumin more absorbable so it gets to the site of action where it's needed. So all those were some of the products that AOR were keen to introduce. And again, we're not a Me Too company. We don't want to be. Um, our business model has always been introduce through research novel ingredients that tend to work and can be backed up by science. And it's important. The reason this is important for our industry is because we're constantly under the scrutiny and constantly being bashed by the media, by the regulators, FDA, Health Canada, by the pharmaceutical industry. They look at upon us very negatively, by the medical community. So we need to always be cognizant of the fact, and we can counter all those by doing the proper research and saying, look, our products have the validated research.
Right. So congratulations, you've hit the 30-year mark already, which is great. So
Yes,
what are you currently working on, and what's next for your business?
Well, you mentioned in the introduction, one of the key uh, interests of mine were, anti-aging. And anti-aging is now loosely used term, but how, as more and more people are living, longer lifespans, how do we ensure that its quality is there? So that is something that AOR has looked into. And of course, you have to validate that. You can't just say, well, this is an anti-aging, will help you live. No, you have to back it up with good science. And so there are a number of products we're looking into through novel mechanisms. And we hope to introduce those very shortly. And then there is always unique delivery systems. I mean, one of the problems of natural products is, they're not absorbed properly and they cannot get to the site of action. So if you have a sore elbow, or, we are having issues with memory, for example, as I do, we need to make sure that the ingredient can get to the blood, can get to the brain or to the elbow or to the knee or whatever, in a meaningful dose, in a meaningful concentration. So AOR also looks at ways of delivering natural health products so they're absorbed better. And we'll have introduced a few more innovative technologies there as well.
So looking at, those supplements and anti-aging products, how early do you think we should all start consuming them? Is there that age where you say, okay, as soon as I turn 30, this is when it's not too late? Would you suggest there's a certain age or time frame that we should be thinking about?
So I think one has to balance that answer with the question, well, what can I afford when I am at, say, in my mid 20s versus when I'm in mid 60s? What can I afford? What my priorities are? And so it would be easy to say, well, start very young, start early. But I don't think so. I don't think there's a hard and first of all, there's no research to say when to start those anti-aging. The reason I think my demographics, my age look at this is because I think we need them now. And of course, as we age, lots of whether it's enzymes or these nutrients are lower levels by the time we come to our age. So therefore, you need to supplement them. So I would say, yes, I would say, just as a guess, I would say around 50s is a time to start really investing. So, well, maybe I should be taking certain supplements that need to be. If you can do it earlier, that's better. But there's no hard science I can prove to say, yeah, take it in your 40s or 30s.
Okay, good to know. So, where do you think the health and supplement market will be in the future?
Well, Crystal, Chantel, sorry, my crystal ball broke long, long time ago, early in the career, when I used to be able to think I can kind of gauge where things are happening. So I don't know, to be honest. I don't know where things are going. I do know that continued research is necessary, and to stick with that. That's the mainstay. As to where the industry is heading is really hard to tell. I mean, there's a lot of talk about gut microbiome, which is very relevant, or is a lot of talk about personalized nutrition. But are we there in the personalized nutrition? I think we're still far away from the actual practicality of getting those. But apart from that, no, I don't know.
It's tough to tell, right?
Absolutely.
So before I ask you my final question, we're going to open it up to the audience Q&A very shortly. So please make sure to ask your questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to your questions. So last big one, what is the first thing you'll do once the pandemic is actually over? What are you excited to do?
Uh, I said that my pandemic hasn't really affected my life. So I'll do the same thing as I did the day before and the day before that, really.
Well, that's good to know. At least nothing's going to really
Yeah.
affect your daily routine. Do you ever travel for work? Is that something that you've had to do in the past and you couldn't in the last couple of years?
Yes, that is true. I mean, I had to go to a lot of conferences or meet up some researchers. Of course, the pandemic kind of halted that. But we also found that Zoom conferencing or this is such an easy way to do it. So I'm wondering whether one needs to travel. I mean, out for work, anyways. At least, obviously, leisure is a different thing.
Mhm.
So
Of course. Yeah,
uh,
we've all been able to switch and do this every day. So I hear you. We can do
yeah,
it.
yeah, and I'm not as boring as I look or I say. I think I'm all for travel and all for excitement. That pandemic is gonna be lifted for sure. Yes.
Of course, of course. Okay, so here's a couple questions from the audience here. So from Joseph, how do we know if the supplements we're buying are of quality? Are there red flags that we should avoid?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know there is a definitive answer to that, unfortunately, because the industry, due to the pressures, will promote the promotional material sometimes get ahead of what the truth is. Unfortunately, so it's hard to say. I mean, every company will say we make the best formulations on that. Um, so, how is a consumer to decipher good from bad? That's a very good question and a very difficult question to answer. I would say, like, for example, look at the research and not just at the website, go independent research, and see if that ingredient or that product has some clinical studies. That's very important. Look at if you can, decipher the robustness of the study. I mean, a lot of the time, our industry can make a very small study and publish it and say, look, it works. And that's not the case necessarily. Quality is important. A lot of ingredients do come from China. It's just a fact of life, because I think in China, the sourcing is cost effective. They're able to do it better. The West sort of shut down all those plants and relied on China and India to do that. But there is good suppliers from China. There's not so good suppliers. So that also depends on part of your research. Short of that, it's hard to tell. I didn't give a definitive answer, and I can't. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure it depends on the products as well. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
the labeling, but is there anything on the label that would maybe call out something that's a little bit more, safe or that we should look at when it comes to the actual product itself?
Well, I think from a label perspective, you can certainly take a look at, one thing, easy thing that anybody can do is look at the excipients, which is the non-medicinal ingredients on the label stated, and look at that and say, well, why is so much? A lot of the some of the products do contain things that shouldn't be there. No need, like magnesium stearate or silicon dioxide or certain other ingredients. But that's just a very tiny portion of the answer to that. I think the biggest answer is, well, okay, is there any research? If you say this is anti-aging, show me the research, and a human research. I don't want a worm study or an animal study. I want a human study. That's going towards answering that question.
Okay. So when you feel stress coming on from a busy lifestyle, how do you recommend managing stress?
Well, first I would say is look at outside the supplement world. Look at your, and again, I think it's a lot to do with the mind. And now we're going away from supplements. Look at the mind. The mind will build narratives. The mind will want to engage in this. Mind will want to, the narrative of, look, the world is against me. This happened to me. Why it happened to me? And I think if we can disengage, very easy to say, very difficult to do, is one thing first. So look at that aspect. Look for a solution then, as opposed to saying, well, rather than focusing on the woe me kind of narrative, look at solution. Well, what can I do? But from a supplement, I think exercise is very important. I think far more important than supplements. I mean, you take deep breaths or you go for a walk, clear your head. These things do work. From a supplement perspective, yes, there are a number of supplements that have good study. I think saffron, especially for stress, especially for that kind of thing, is very exciting herb to be. And there's lots of research. That would be one, just a one.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Um, so a question from Mary here. Why use folic acid in your B complex and no T folate? It's a very specific question.
No, I think Mary's right. I think one does need to use the active form, the tetrahydrofolate, THF. So that is the active form. In AOR typically uses the active forms of vitamins. There's vitamins, and then vitamins need to be converted into their active form in the body. And sometimes people lack that, ability to convert into the active form. So therefore, by giving the active form, you 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 know prevent any issues there, and you get a quicker onset of action. So she's quite right. One should use the active forms of folic acid, the 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate.
Okay, thank you. A question from Max. Are there any third-party certifications for the quality of product?
There are a number, but they are third party. They're not validated. So for example, there's NSF, there's USP certification. But Health Canada, when they give you the license as an establishment license to all supplement manufacturers, they have a pretty strict guidelines of GMP, good manufacturing practices. And that certificate is pretty onerous. And if you can meet that, I think you are onto delivering a good supplement for sure. Having added third-party certification is just extra. Whether it's needed, I don't know. But if you follow the GMP guidelines, and now Health Canada is instituted where you have to do stability studies to show that your product is safe, not only and is stable, is active. So I think GMP is more than enough, but additional is just added.
Okay. How are natural supplements tested for efficiency? Is the testing process similar to those of standard medications?
And that is where the big problem is. They're not. So most supplement companies tend to do a small human trial just to show that it is perhaps safe. But note that the trials are usually very small, 10, 12, 15 patients, and for a short period of time. So they don't give you a complete picture. And this is why a model has to be much like the pharma industry. We have to do similar type of long-term studies to show effectiveness, to be able to answer this very specific question. And at the moment, we're on that journey, but we're nowhere near that end goal, what the pharma industry does. And we need to get close to it. That is why it's so important when you're looking at a supplement or trying to choose a supplement, see if there are human studies, and if the more, the better.
We still have a long way to go, right?
Yes.
So question from Bill, what websites do you recommend to review research? So any websites would you recommend for research?
Well, I think AOR website is pretty good. It's got a lot of science, PubMed, and literature. We try to update the research. Apart from that, it is look at PubMed. It's not any company biased, and I think that is you can actually get the abstracts and in some cases papers.
Oh, I think you just cut out right at the very end. So another question from Max, do you conduct your own trials? And I think you might have just touched on that if we missed it.
Yes, we do. Obviously, conducting a human clinical trial is costly. But where we do AOR products have been introduced, they all have clinical research, whether it's AOR's general or it is the of the ingredient or partner, they've done it, or whether AOR's done it. Yes, majority of the products do have clinical research to verify that the products are active, certainly safe.
Okay. So any recommendations for supplements that will help with anti-aging? I know you talked about anti-aging a little bit, especially skin health and laxity.
Yes. Um, so obviously from skin health, not necessarily aging. I mean, collagen is a buzzword, but I don't think it's an anti-aging. It certainly would help with the elasticity, the moisture content of the skin. So from a more of a, but from an anti-aging, I would say currently that are out there, there's few ingredients that are not available to Canadians. One of them is called NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. That's a long name. It's a form of vitamin B3. At the moment, Health Canada doesn't allow that. In the US, they're available. That has some decent science to say that may help with anti-aging. One of the best anti-agings that we have access to as Canadians is curcumin, which is widely available in turmeric. So I would say go for a good bioavailable form of curcumin. I mean, AOR has one, so there are others on the market. And the ones that achieve the highest, best blood levels, I would say curcumin does have anti-aging. Other anti-aging that are coming up are from pomegranate. At the moment, pomegranate is but there are purified versions which are not available. That's what we're working on, will be also very useful.
Right. So why are most supplements in capsule form versus powder or liquid?
Yeah, I think the difficulty with the liquid is, of course, stability, because liquids tend to go off degrade quicker. But also the taste is an issue with both powders and liquids. It's very hard to mask the taste and deliver all the ingredients in a uniform so they don't get separated in the powder. You have to have the same particle size. So the taste is the biggest challenge. So hence the need for capsules. And capsules is a better delivery than say tablets, because tablets have to further go into the stomach and then disintegrate. Capsules do that much more easily. So if we can overcome the challenge of the taste and masking it, I think powders would be a great way to go.
And are there any books you would recommend for us to read on supplements and health in general?
I don't have any recommendations. I tend to go to the original research. So hence I said the best website for that is pubmed.org, pubmed.org. Lots of scientific articles, actual articles by researchers, so it's unbiased. But no, I don't recommend any book because I don't myself revert to any of those, unfortunately.
And so having access to saffron and curcumin and turmeric, these are all, products that don't originate from Canada. So how would you say is the best way to even source these products that are not available here?
Yeah, I think lots of virtually every Canadian supplement company offers at least the curcumin and turmeric. Look for quality. As I said, the trouble with curcumin is delivery getting into the bloodstream. and all curcumins are not created equal. I know we say this, but they're not. I mean, many of them don't get absorbed, or they get broken down by the stomach acids or the liver enzymes before they even get to the blood. So having a good source is good, but I mean, if we want to go outside those ingredients, there's which come from, say, India or China, look for something like lipoic acid. So AOR back in 2001, I believe, AOR introduced the more active form of alpha lipoic acid, the R lipoic acid, which is the most active form. And that is another anti-aging, probably on a lower dose than curcumin and turmeric. So look at R plus lipoic acid and that's a natural molecule. Um, if that's what your question was intended to.
Yeah, and I think it's just, having access to some of these products that definitely aren't from Canada. What it doesn't make it a lot more difficult to get your hands on it in the first place for your own business.
No, I don't think so. I think there was, in fact, I don't think turmeric was affected, by anything from because of the pandemic. I think where turmeric and curcumin are affected, and some of the herbs like, ginkgo and that, is sometimes is when there is a serious, seasonal like monsoons or whatever, and that have a more disruptive than the pandemic had. I don't think we were affected by some of these herbs from, and obviously India is having this issue of flights, so maybe you can, but at the moment, I don't think there's any issues of getting turmeric or curcumin availability in Canada.
Okay. So another question from Max: Can vitamins be made from the food source, and are they available by AOR?
Yes, so food source is a good way, but unfortunately, sometimes food sources are not as economical. And you have to look at the economy of it. So, for example, trying to get some of the vitamins from various foods is much more costly endeavor than being able to synthesize them. And we have to also note synthesis, whilst they may have a negative connotation, the word is not that bad, because at the end of the day, a vitamin is a vitamin, whether it's in a synthesized chemically or whether it comes from a plant. If you got a B12, B12 is B12. Doesn't the body doesn't care whether you get it from whatever, as long as it's is free of any toxicity or contaminants, which is often the case. You can get high purity. So whilst it's nice to have a food line delivering all the vitamins, the trouble is, A, it's economy, and secondly, a lot of our foods don't have enough. You have to concentrate a lot. So I don't know, you have to concentrate several kilos to get a tiny amount of in a capsule of, say, nitrates, which is unfortunate.
Right, that's a lot. A question here from Shondell: Can you discuss the difference between the synergy of whole food supplements versus isolated or synthetic vitamins, and why is AOR uses the forms to do so?
Yeah, I think so. AOR looks at the research. At the end of the day, scientific research, there is a research aspect, and then of course there is a whole food natural aspect. And I think certainly when you take certain herbs, it's important that you don't extract out completely. It's far better to get a herb from its concentrate extract, as opposed to synthesize it. But a lot of the vitamins, a lot of the minerals it's impossible to do so from natural food. So you have to kind of synthesize them. It's a very practical way. And the body, as I said, the body's receptor where it works doesn't care. It doesn't care whether it's from natural derived or not. I think we have to be very careful. And science is largely, most of the research is typically done on these synthetic vitamins, right? There are no natural vitamins that I know of sources and then clinically studied to show that they are an alternate. I think so. Most vitamins studied in the research are all due to these synthetics because they're so much more economical, they're reproducible, and there's nothing wrong with them. Because if you look at they are produced in a condition under controlled conditions. You can control the toxicity, you can control the contaminants, you can control the quality of it repeatedly. Plants, unfortunately, will waver depending on the growing conditions, because depending on the storage conditions, because of, and then prone to getting. So if we can, I think herbs should be left as herbs, as extracts. But when it comes to certain supplements like alpha-lipoic acid, like, for example, vitamins and minerals, unfortunately, we have to look at the synthetic route.
And last question here. Do you think supplements or natural medicine could ever replace standard medicine in some way? Do you think some medicine is overprescribed and can be instead replaced with natural supplements?
Absolutely. I mean, remember the goal of AOR was, as a pharmacist, was, well, why can't natural products work as effectively and as quickly? If I'm taking something for my pain, I don't want to wait 2 days. I want it to be like ibuprofen, work very quickly, but without the side effects of ibuprofen. I think it's doable. Absolutely. Yeah, it's gonna take time. How is gonna take time is to do more research. We have to produce more clinical data, robust studies, and show, look, these natural products, they are nature's a treasure trove of ingredients that are waiting to be discovered, waiting to be put in forms that the body wants, as opposed to prescription drugs. I mean, there's a place for prescription drugs. I'm a pharmacist too. Absolutely. So there's a place for that, but I think nature can rival it for sure.
Definitely.
But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We cannot treat, hypertension, for example, or diabetes, or other forms of certainly, infections at the moment. I'd rather go to a physician, get the prescription that works. But if we keep this route of research, we can get there for sure.
I think that would be amazing. So this takes us to the end of the hour. We are all out of questions. Thank you so much, Traj, for your time today. This was so insightful. It was great. It was an amazing conversation. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you all stay safe. I hope we all get to see each other in person in real life very soon. But for now, please stay safe, and we'll see you again at the next event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chantal, and everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.